Wrestling for a pay-per-view matchup with Ric Flair later this year. The story, which has been spread within WCW and is well known at this point throughout wrestling, is that a Flair Hogan pay-per-view match will take place probably over the summer. In addition, the NATPE convention held this past week in Miami Beach, Hogan talked openly about returning to wrestling in May after filming 22 episodes of Thunder in Paradise, and brought up Flair's name as the opponent he wants to wrestle. At this point, there's said to be no contractual deal between Hogan and WCW, and other WCW sources are exceedingly skeptical that such a deal will ever take place. How plugged in are you guys with, I guess, let me just back that up. To the best of your understanding, what was the relationship like between Vince and Hulk Hogan here in February of 94?
I don't think there was much of a relationship at that point. I think that, 93, at the end of 93, that Vince had resigned himself, that Hulk wanted to go off and do his Thunder in Paradise. The fact that Hulk was using talent from WCW that was doing tapings, I believe in Disney at the time in Orlando, that was kind of a statement by Hulk saying, hey, you know, he didn't reach out to anybody on the WWF side to say, hey, I'd like to use some of your guys, give them exposure on this show. So the writing was kind of on the wall, and that relationship between Vince and Hulk was strained. They weren't talking. And when I say they weren't talking, they might talk once every couple of weeks, but it just, that's always been a love-hate relationship. And when it's good, it's very good. And when it's bad, it was bad. This was a time that Hulk could distance himself, and I think Hulk saw the opportunity with Thunder in Paradise to go off and become a David Hasselhoff in the syndication world. So he saw bigger and better things, and if he was going to do wrestling, maybe he would do it for a different billionaire, even though Vince wasn't a billionaire at the time.
When you guys started to hear that maybe Hogan is talking to WCW, and you and I've talked about this on the show before, sometimes Hogan would just flirt with the media and court this attention and tease it just to get the other side to make an offer. When you hear this news that, hey, maybe Hulk's going to sign with WCW, do you think at this time, well, he's not really, because if he was gonna, he already would have. He's just using this to see if Vince will call?
Definitely there's that thought there, because you're waiting for that call. You're waiting for, hey, I'm thinking about going over here unless you can talk me into staying here. So that always happened. And there was also, you'd also run through that, the breakup period where you're really sad at first. And then you get to the point, well, that bitch, she two-timed me, or she's going out with that other guy. Fuck her. I think that it ran the gambit with Hulk of, well, he's going on to do other things, to, well, that son of a bitch, he's now flirting with WCW and he's using their talent. He's not even calling us for our talent. So I think there were hurt feelings, and probably on both sides, that made it, okay, we'll show him, or him on us. I'll show them. It went both ways.
Well, they did get some stuff right. On May 29th, WCW puts tickets on sale for the July 6th visit to the Georgia Dome, and it looks like they're going to set a record in a hurry. With no matches announced whatsoever, WCW sold over 14,000 tickets for over $541,000 in sales, and that's with no matches announced. It actually beat the Starrcade 97 gate by $120, and it did it in its very first day. By a couple of days later, June 1st, they were over 17,000 tickets sold, and there were over 623,000 tickets, or $623,000. So this is really, really going to break major records here. And upon hearing these numbers, surprise, surprise, Hulk Hogan volunteers to work a non-title dark match on the show against Goldberg. And Meltzer writes of this, and this is pretty smart. This is one of the reasons Hogan is where he is in the business. All those tickets have already been sold without anyone having knowledge of the match. No doubt when the match is officially announced locally in about a week, it will help sales even more. And with it being the final Nitro before the San Diego pay-per-view, where both Rodman and another celebrity are expected to shoot a major angle at the show, this will be pushed heavily WCW was planning for a 24,000 seat setup, but now the tickets are going so well, they're going to expand it to a 38,000 seat setup and could approach $1 million gate for the first time in the history of the company and the first time in the United States for anyone other than the WWF, which had at that point done it 6 times. And with all this is said and done and the event is over, it won't be remembered as WCW Nitro drawing the house or Rodman doing an angle. It will be Hogan and Goldberg drew the house. And more importantly, Turner and Time Warner bigwigs, some of whom will be in the building that night, will be amazed at the crowd for a wrestling event. And of course, attribute it to Hogan since he's the biggest name in the main event. So there's so much to cover on this July show that we'll get to in a minute. But before we do that, when you hear these records are being made and then broken just a few months later, because there was a record set in January, we just talked about it at the Georgia Dome, and now we're breaking it already. And all of that broke the Starrcade record from the month before in December. Do you feel like this is, the pinnacle of WCW? Because I know for years and years you had to think, well, we're going out of business any day now. And now you're setting records every few months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was our high spot. This is our biggest deal, and I think a lot of that. I think WCW's was put on the map by us signing Hulk Hogan. I don't think there's any question about that, because we had the hardcore, if I can use that term, wrestling fans. They would watch us and the old school wrestling fans, but when we got Hogan, that exposed our business, what a term, to a whole new group of fans, because he was a big name. And anybody who will tell you, there was a guy who worked in our pay-per-view, and I can't remember his name. There was a guy that said that our pay-per-view buys for the first Hogan match, which I guess was in Orlando.
That's right.
Okay. Our buys for our pay-per-view match went through the roof, and we're through the roof ever since Hogan was with us. So I think we neglect sometimes to talk about how much of an impact Hogan made on WCW. And I don't think there was any question that night was our biggest night. Well, because it looked like to me, and I know it was I know they curtained it off and everything, or did they? It just looked like to me that we had completely sold out the Georgia Dome. And, Atlanta was our home. And that to me, that seemed to be the pinnacle of everything that we'd ever done.
Let's talk about Hogan. Do you think this is mastermind level stuff here for him to sneak in the top spot after the show was already on pace to smash the records? Or is this just Dave trying to villainize the Hulkster, brother?
Yeah, I think Dave is trying to villainize the Hulkster, but I think a lot of that, because Hogan had that, apparently is out in his contract, or that he had final say on his character.
Right.
I think a lot of that was done. I think it's pretty obvious. But I think that was the only way Eric Bischoff was able to sign Hogan, to give him final say on his character.
Sure.
I don't know if Hogan sneaking in at the very end was Hogan being Hulk Hogan or not.
Hogan not jump ship. And Hulk Hogan was, of course, the guy I grew up on in the WWF. And then one day he left for greener pastures, or maybe just more green. And Eric Bischoff came along. Not that kind of green. Come on now. It's a different kind of show. Okay.
I would have gone for that kind of green.
Hulkster loved his weed, bro.
So let's talk about this. Why in the world would Vince McMahon let the cash cow ever leave?
We were done with him. Just saying. No, the reality of the situation was Hulk had a hell of a run in the WWF, and Hulk, built the WWF from the ground up. And he, along with Vince, did Vince make Hulk? Did Hulk make the WWF? And that argument will be made forever. But he was synonymous with the WWF. Hulk was looking to do other things. He wanted to do his television series. He wanted to do movies and other things, which opened that door, and we all know what happened from there.
Yeah, but there was this little thing called the steroid trial that kind of happened in the middle of that. Tell me that didn't have something to do with Hulk leaving WWF.
No, it didn't. Why? Because Hulk did steroids and wanted to go somewhere where he could continue to do steroids. Is that what you're trying to say? I'm just asking the question. You brought it up.
No,
did you guys test?
Yes, we did. You're trying to change the subject really quick, but if I
Did you allow guys to
remember,
study?
Hang on. I feel like we all know that Eric Bischoff would test positive for Blue Chew. All right.
no shit. And if you don't test positive for Blue Chew, you don't know what you're missing. I tried snorting it the other day. I sneezed my ass off for about a week. So now I mix it up with my beer. Nothing like Blue Chew and Coors Light.
You got to chop it up first before you snort it.
No, really? God dang.
Pro tip. Just giving y'all a pro tip. Just letting y'all know.
So, yeah, let's go ahead and talk about it. You contend that the steroid trial is the reason that Vince McMahon could no longer afford Hulk Hogan?
No, it's really a question. I'm not making a statement, but there was this issue about the steroid trial. Obviously, Hulk Hogan was a witness against or a witness for the prosecution, and there was a separation of church and state. Vince and Hulk were on opposite sides of that equation, and I think when the trial was over, Vince wanted nothing to do with Hulk Hogan because he wanted to try to separate himself from the trial as much as he could. That's just my observation, and it's a question. Was that true?
Not really. The main thing was Hulk had left, and Hulk wanted to do other things. He wanted to be able to do his series, wanted to be able to do a lot of that. Now, the steroid trial definitely came in during that time, but nothing Hulk said damaged Vince in any way, shape, or form.
No, actually, everything Hulk said, I think, on the trial
probably helped him.
Helped him. We both agree on that.
So, it just opened that door, and there was all of a sudden an availability that I don't think that Hulk would have ever even considered that became available. Ted Turner in WCW was now an option, and yeah.
Now, if I can, I'm going to jump in here, and I want to address a little bit of the narrative that you opened this up with. I agree with you, Bruce. I think when Hulk walked away from WWF, in his mind, he was walking away from wrestling. I never thought. Right. I don't think that he ever had the thought in his mind where he was going to end up somewhere else. Perhaps maybe go back to WWF someday. But I doubt that he thought for a moment that he was going to end up in WCW. However, Conrad, I don't think it was greener pastures. He certainly didn't come to WCW for more money. He made less money in WCW than he did in WWF.
Oh, fuck off. That's not true.
Bruce, I know how much money. I saw his quarterly licensing checks while he was working for me that added up to more than he was making in WCW. So it's not bullshit. Bruce, you tell me. What was he making?
And Eric, look, guys, you're going to hear this all night tonight. Narrative. And you're going to hear Eric's narrative, and you're going to hear my narrative. While in the beginning, and I don't know what Hulk was making at WCW, but in the beginning, Hulk may have not made as much money in WCW.
Conrad.
However, right? Okay. He probably did not make as much money, but he probably worked a tenth of the time and a tenth of the dates. So if you were to multiply the same number of dates, then they were probably paying him more money per appearance and per.
Yeah, but if we were paying him in Chinese money, we would have actually been paying him a lot less.
Okay, let's move on.
Interesting question about Hulk Hogan here. Based on how the WWF presented itself, what was your reaction when Hulk Hogan came to WCW, considering that he had been the face of the enemy, New York, for so long? In some vein, that had to feel a little weird, right?
Yeah, but the boys were not enemies against each other. It was just the office. So unless, someone in that locker room felt that Hogan had duped them in some way or shortchanged them or something had happened on a personal level while they were in the WWF, I'm sure him walking in the door, my mentality was, okay, he's here. Looks like this is a legit deal. Now, how do I get myself in a position to wrestle him? Because I know him dropping that leg on me. When I roll out of the ring that night, I'm better than I was the night before. And getting beat right in the middle because you're in the mix with Hulk Hogan. You're in a angle with Hulk Hogan. That was what I was trying to figure out. Not how I would dodge being a victim of that leg, but how am I going to get in the position to get that leg dropped on me?
I love that that's your attitude, because I do feel like, from the outside looking in, a traditionalist would say, man, his style of wrestling is so much different. It's a much more cartoonish presentation. And, it just feels like the old NWA, fans may not have just gravitated to a Dungeon of Doom style storyline or the alliance to end Hulkamania. But your point is, as a performer, whether it was something you had been doing or not, that's where the money was, or at least for the last decade or so, right?
Hey, I can do ha-ha with the best of them. It's just when it's time to get mine, I have to get it the way I would get it. But hey, I can do all the goofy stuff that you want to do, if that's what you want to do at that time. But when it's time that this belongs to me, we're going to change the mood a little bit. And that's how you survive. That's how you maintain your character. And that's how you get through a match with a guy that's style is totally different from yours.
Let's talk about, Sting. Stephen Flynn writes in, which Sting did you like better? Bleach Blonde Surfer or the Crow?
Bleach Blonde Surfer. The kids loved him. The audience loved him. He had the character down, looked like $1 million, looked like a superstar, and became a superstar.
Funny question here from Tommy Nitro, because I don't know what your answer is going to be. Arn, what's the funniest thing you ever saw Jake Roberts do?
Didn't really see Jake do anything funny. I know that he was scared to death of that snake. You might consider this funny. For a guy that has a snake phobia to be carrying a 20-foot python around and throw it in the shower and just pray that it stays in there, cut the lights out and cut the water on and just pray that it stays in there. It was pretty funny watching him try to get that thing back in a bag, because he truly was, unless he was lying to me. He told me on the QT one time, he said, I'm definitely afraid of snakes. Well, then you are eat up with the dumbass because you got the wrong gimmick.
John Riga wants to know who has the best working punch and who has the best shoot punch in wrestling. Of course, he means not named Ming.
Bobby Eaton's got a tremendous punch. A lot of those guys that came through Tennessee, Jerry Lawler, different guys, you had to develop a really good punch. He had one. Bobby Eaton had one. Brad Armstrong had a great punch. Bob Armstrong, definitely a great punch. Who am I missing?
Jerry Lawler had a good one, but you probably didn't do much with him.
Nope. I only wrestled Jerry once, and that was a 6-man tag in Memphis, bunkhouse style match. It was, I think, him and Magnum and Dusty against me, Ole, and Tully, Memphis Coliseum. Those are the ones that come to mind right off the get-go. Shawn Michaels, good punch.
Interesting question here from Canadian Travis. Something that, I'm sure a lot of listeners have maybe been curious about. Have you ever seen Vince McMahon fire someone in real life the way he's done it on TV? Of course, he's referencing the very exaggerating, "You're fired." You ever seen that?
I don't think he does the firing. Pretty sure he has someone do it that's underneath him. I would almost bet on it.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.